You guys love the disruptive reads. Well, some of you do. Some definitely do not. This one is the most powerful disruptive read I've had yet. I'll leave a link to all of them if these resonate to you. There's so much here. And I have to give my warnings, as you all know. You all know I must disclose what I'm going to do before I begin. If you do not want to actively remove a connection for good, do not continue to watch this video. Like I explained in one of my first ever disruptive videos on YouTube, entitled The Only Tarot Reading You Will Ever Need Again, this is very similar. It is going to fundamentally change the way you view this cord, your connection to this person, and why the cord is still lingering. Once you see the truth, you cannot unsee it, so it'll change the cord's strength, even if you're not truly ready for that. I don't say any of this lightly, so please don't take it lightly. If you want to remain stuck, connected to this person, if you don't want to dissolve the illusion and you want to keep feeding this cord, I recommend skipping this. And that really might sound silly to a lot of people, is like, am I trying to get more attention? Am I trying to create anticipation here and give a fake disclaimer? No, I genuinely mean the reality is, a lot of you will not want to actively remove this connection. You may think you want it, but you don't actually want it. And these are the people that are usually deeply in illusion. They are believing their twin flame is going to come back, believing in false hope. They are deep within the bargaining stages of grief, and they don't want to actually heal. They just think that they do. And so that's why I'm laying this disclaimer on so thick, is I'm not building suspense. This is legitimate. There are people who truly are not ready. They will feel scared to actually sever the remains of the connection if it starts dismantling without them being ready. This connection probably means a lot to them, and that means that closing the door without opening a new one is going to create fear. It's going to be a scary feeling. And that's why people hold on to connections longer than they should. People are scared of uncertainty. They are scared and they cling to the past. They hold on to connections. They hold on to cords for longer periods of time because it is a way of controlling their certainty. It is what they have control of. And so you'll notice by your reaction to this video, if you continue and you haven't left yet, if you feel dismissive for this information, if you begin pointing at me personally instead of hearing the contents of the message, it is not your time to sever the cord yet, and that is totally okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes you need the steps in between. You can't just decide one day that you're done. You have to truly be ready to let go, and it takes time to be ready to release and sit in the void before the next thing really shows. So if you're not ready for that void space, this will be uncomfortable for you. And again, you heard my warning. It's up to you if you take it seriously or not. Okay, so first we are going to start with a very brief explanation of what a cord actually is. Do not skip this part. It is important even if you get bored. Even if you just want to jump to how to remove the cord, you need to know what it actually is to remove it properly. All parts of this message are important, and again, this message is for everyone who's ready for it. Let's start with a general understanding of what cord energy is first, why it's so commonly misunderstood, and why people struggle with it in the first place because of this. Most people think an energetic cord between two people is something that just is. They believe it exists outside of their control, and it remains that way indefinitely. It remains that way forever. A common misunderstanding about a connection cord is many people think it's karmic and it is fixed, meaning it is outside of your true control, it is unchanging, it is divinely placed, and no matter what, it will stay and persist for a timeline that is predetermined to what you can change. People believe this, but interestingly enough, here's the most important part, they still will perform rituals. They still will act in ceremonial ways out of desperation or urgency to try to see what energetic effect they may have anyway, even though their deep core belief within is, this is outside of my control, ultimately, no matter what I do. So they still try to act in ways to control it. They'll experiment with their control, with their intention, if possible. They don't really understand the rituals, but they try to believe in them because they're desperate to get the cord removed. It's kind of like experimenting with their true energy control and power. So first, it is true that a cord exists outside of your control to some degree. A cord is divinely placed, And you really have no real authority of how many chords come into your field and activate. And so it's true, you don't really have a say in that part. But the timeline, or how long the chord lasts, is in your control. Now, I'm going to explain the two sides of a chord, because this is important, and who has the true authority to control the timeline of how long a chord actually persists and how long it stays active. So a chord is made up of two parties, as you know. One side of the chord we will call the feeder, and the other side of the chord we will call the receiver. This is essentially the polarity that keeps the energy circulating within the chord. One side is giving, one side is taking. That is polarity. Those are opposites. The receiver, just as the word kind of seems, creates an imbalance from their receiving. Because they receive and they do not give energy back to the one that's giving, they take. That is the imbalance of the chord, of the connection. But there's a circuit there that functions regardless of the polarity. The feeder, this is the important part, controls the chord because they are the starting energy point of that chord itself. Without the feeder, the chord would never start. It would never ignite in the first place. So they are the ignition. And it's important you understand the feeder is the party that technically has the most control because they are the primary control driver. They are the starting mechanism. And just for the sake of addressing all the edge cases and questions I'm probably going to get, we can say there is control that can exist from the receiver as well. Technically, the receiver can stop eating. They can stop receiving the energy that the feeder is giving. The receiver, to some degree, has control because if they stop, the chord would die as well. So we aren't ignoring that fact. That fact is still important. The reason this message is focused on and will be focused on the feeder is because the feeder is the one that not only starts, that not only ignites the connections, but they also control it because they are the ones that are not benefiting from it inherently. The receivers that take the power, that siphon, that benefit, they don't control because in the meantime, they are gaining power. They are benefiting. So the ones that really control this connection, this chord, the longevity, the timeline, are interestingly enough the ones that have the least power in the meantime. They have the most power to control it, but the least power as it's existing. So this entire message is focused around the feeder. You'll know you're a feeder because you'll just feel it from me saying this and feel that you've overextended in relationships and that you've given without someone giving back to you. But also you'll just feel like you are powerless because you are giving your energy away and thus you feel like you cannot control the timeline. But it is actually the opposite that is true. The feeders are the most powerful even though they are giving their energy away to someone who is benefiting in the meantime. Now we're going to talk through what keeps a chord alive and what to actually do to sever, to cut the cord completely when you are ready to do so. If you skipped the first part about what a chord is, you will not understand this part. So go back and watch it, even if you want the juicy part first. You're kind of doing yourself a disservice here by thinking you can skip parts of the message and still get the full effect and resonance. So go back. Okay, we talked about who this message is for, the circuit of a chord that starts with one party, the primary party we're focusing on, the feeder. The feeder is who holds the power of the chord's timeline. The feeder controls how long the chord stays active. How long it truly persists is within the power of the feeder. So hopefully we all understand that at this point. You do not get to decide how many chords you have, when they come, but you do get to decide, as the feeder, how long you want the chord to last. A feeder is truly in control in this way. Now, the real way you dismantle a chord as a feeder, not as a receiver, because we're focused on the feeders here, is through your behaviors and actions on a daily basis. This is why those rituals, those cord cutting ceremonies essentially do nothing. They focus on intention setting. They focus on a brief moment in time that doesn't change the behaviors that actively feed the cord and keep the circuit going. What they do is they only focus on one moment, one energy setting, one intention setting, and then it's done. It never exists again. It's out of your thought, out of your field. And this isn't to diss on your favorite readers or your favorite healers who talk about cord cutting rituals and who do this intentional setting ceremony type of thing. They still have their place. I'm sure they have good intentions. They are just misinformed. They're too focused on intention setting and not focused enough on the daily energetic feedback loops that really matter in cord longevity. It's kind of like they're tapping into what we desire the experience to change a cord would be, how it would be just kind of like this simple declaration. We do it once and it's done, but that's not how it truly works. It truly works in a way that's not easy, it's not fun, it's not a one-time thing. It takes multiple intentional efforts. So now, let's talk about the behaviors that feed the cord circuit and that actually keep the connection alive, and why you're feeding it much longer than you logically want to. The feeder does behaviors essentially that take their energy and push it through the cord itself, if you can visualize that with me. Most of these behaviors where they're doing this is very unconscious. They don't realize they're doing it. They're doing it without an understanding of what feeds a cord. So it's going to maybe be kind of uncomfortable to hear that you're the one keeping it alive if you are a feeder. And it might be easier to continue to think it's outside of your control, to continue to think it's divinely placed and it divinely stays in this way you have no effect on. Because then you don't have to look at yourself, right? So that's where the disruption kind of comes in is, oops, sorry, let's look at you. And that's why this message is so powerful, is you're going to finally be conscious of the behaviors you've been doing if you are a feeder that affect this struggle you've been having, where you want to be free, but you can't really be free. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Here are some specific behavioral patterns we need to talk about as a feeder that you have unconsciously been doing that keeps this cord alive. And the last one I need to preface, is the most important one. So listen to all three and be sure to stay until the end. Number 1, you explain yourself to them or try to have them understand you. Okay, this is usually something that exists within the connection itself. And sometimes after the connection ends, you don't really have a place to explain yourself. However, it still can reignite a cord circuit, if you're going back to connections and trying to explain things to them even after it ends. So this is like where you spend a lot of time in no contact, you don't talk to them, and then you revisit them and you're like, let's get closure. This is like long conversations with someone that try to explain yourself, that try to rehash the past, and you're really actively seeking that understanding. You'll spend hours with someone who can't see you, who has never properly been able to see you, and you're bargaining with them. You're hoping that if you can explain it in the right way, they will finally hear it. They will finally see you. These are the conversations that you have or you continue to have where you're trying to unlock closure or true understanding. And it's keeping the connection circuit alive. It's feeding the cord because you are pushing hope through the cord. And your energy is coming from within to outside of yourself externally. And they are siphoning that energy. The way they're siphoning it, the way that they're taking it in, is they're feeding off your hope. They're hearing your passion and devotion to the connection. And that is kind of feeding their ego in a way. It makes them feel important. It makes them feel loved that you would spend this much time and effort and energy to explain, to have them understand. And they aren't sending that understanding, that explanation back to you. They aren't seeing you. They aren't feeding you love. And that's why it's siphoning. That's why it's taking. It is not being recirculated back to you in any way. There's never a point here where true understanding and seeing happens because they, for number 1, are not capable of that. And number 2, they are actually feeding off your energy. So they cannot recirculate it back when they are just taking it in. And in this way, you are reactivating the circuit. And that is number 1. Number 2, you are actively trying to understand them. And this one is more tricky because it can exist long after a relationship has ended. You don't need a connection to exist in the physical for you to be doing this, for you to be sending your energy in the cord. You could be unconsciously sending your energy to this person by focusing, by setting deep thoughts about understanding them long after any contact in the physical has been had. This looks like spending time reflecting on the harm and actively trying to understand why and how they did what they did to you. You're understanding them as a person. It's not energy they give back to you. It's not reciprocated. It's only you who sends out this level of active understanding and energetic energy to them. Regular introspection and reflection is a process that feeds you. And I'm going to explain why they're different, because one feeds you and one sends energy to the cord. When you are doing introspection and reflection that is real, you are understanding them in a way to release them for yourself. But when you're feeding a cord in this way, this takes it a step further, because in practice, you don't stop trying to understand. You keep trying to understand. It remains confusing. It still searches for something. No matter how much energy and how much understanding you've done, it will still keep actively looking and seeking. And that's how you know it's feeding a cord, because it's never accepting the understanding at any level that you could uncover or investigate or dig. It is really truly always looking for a deeper layer of understanding, and it will keep you seeking another layer to reflect on as a result. And where this is different from deep understanding is deep understanding feeds yourself. It doesn't siphon your energy into this cord. It takes an understanding and it's peaceful, and it doesn't need more after that. It stops there. It rests. It hears something and puts it down. It really doesn't need more after that. It's just a one and done kind of like peaceful experience. So if you find yourself constantly seeking to understand new layers over and over again and get deeper and deeper and more complex, in a way you can begin to see that by doing this, you're pushing your energy into the cord. You're externally pushing it outward into someone else. They are feeding off of that. And that's why it never feels full. It never creates peace. And it just keeps asking for more answers, is because it's not redirecting within. It is moving externally into the cord, and they are siphoning it. They are taking that power. And that's number 2. Number 3 is you check for this person in places. Now, this one is the biggest, guys. I promised you this. Open your ears fully to receive this as openly as you can, because this is the most important. Checking for this person in places is the biggest way in which you keep your cords alive. It is the most unconscious and the most regular form of feeding that is actually done. There are so many behaviors that check, so don't take the ones I'm going to mention here as definitive or all that is. There are many. Really discern for yourself how you're specifically doing this every day, because this is the most important. And again, it exists the most regularly and the most unconsciously. It's different from explaining or trying to be understood, because that is once in a blue moon. This is the type of feeding that is done unconsciously, and you've been doing it in your daily life, actively soothing something on a regular basis. So stopping these daily unconscious things or these more ritualized behaviors will be the hardest, because you'll feel the lack of soothing that comes from not doing them. It's like the cord will scream, because these are the most regular energy feeds that you give it, even if it is in micro doses. So let's talk about micro checking for this person in your everyday life and what it really looks like. This looks like checking your junk email because you've blocked them on literally everything, but still hoping in some way they will reach out regardless of your blocking. And you do this unconsciously, either weekly, daily, however many times you do this. This is checking. It could also look like refreshing your messages on social media. You're waiting for them to reach out. You're looking for them in posts. You're checking their activity. It can also just look like refreshing your notifications. You're seeing stories. You're seeing if they watch something of yours. You're seeing if they're looking at you. You're checking for them. And so I think you guys can maybe get the point here. This behavior is essentially microchecks. It is reaching out for this person in some way, even very small, but it is checking to see if they are still there, if the cord is still active, even if you don't even realize you're doing it. Each time you're pushing your energy externally as you check for them. And like I said, this one's the hardest to break because it's usually incorporated deeply into your everyday life. It is done without a second thought. It is done thinking it is harmless. And especially within a digital age that we live in with modern conveniences like a smartphone and social media and all of these outlets, this modern life is kind of perpetuating karmic cords because people in the past couldn't check this often. They couldn't do this micro behavior because they didn't have a phone like this. They didn't have a constant stream of connection living in their pocket that they could check for. And so, in other words, this micro behavior, this micro checking, is you checking the cord. It brings you comfort in some way, even if it's unconscious, that the cord is still alive. Even if you're just making sure it's still there, you're feeding it a little bit each time you do that. So why does the feeder do this? This is kind of, I guess, the conclusion of this and a way to kind of like wrap it up in a way that doesn't make you feel like you're all to blame, okay? This is usually done because, like I said at the beginning, when I gave a warning, is unconsciously the feeder has relief in feeling the cord is alive because they're gaining some sort of control in feeling like they can control what they can't control. So it's a very unconscious behavior, and it continues so naturally because of this. In some way, as the feeder, you are being energetically soothed each time you feed a cord because you feel that it's still there and you're controlling that it's still there because ultimately you have the control of whether it dies or not. And that brings you comfort to know that there's still something connecting you to this other person because otherwise you would have to face the death process, the uncertainty of the process that kind of brings you lack of control, in other words. There's a comfort in this cord still living in some way. Whether you want to hear that or not, it is the true unconscious reason for checking for these behaviors. And this is why people usually give the advice to move on to another relationship, to move on to another cord, another connection. It is well intended and there's a reason behind it energetically. Because karmic cords scream when they die, that is a very uncomfortable process. They do not die peacefully. These cords, these connections, karmic or not, it is not a comfortable process to have them die without something replacing them. Your impulses to feed are soothing you. So removing those removes not only all your comfort that you're soothing, this like control need, but also the dying out process is uncomfortable in itself. So it's doing two things. So when you move to a new cord, a new connection, the dying process feels less loud because what you're doing is you're feeding another cord and that is soothing you in some way. You're kind of like replacing where you've soothed before, where you've fed before. So it feels very natural. But here's the important part is moving on to another cord does not stop the cycle that we're talking about here. It continues the cycle of a feeder finding a very hungry, starving person that does not feed the feeder back. The only way to stop this cycle from happening is to basically, you're not going to want to hear this, to sit in the discomfort of no cords at all. To hear the cord scream, to not feed it, to know why it's screaming, and to live in a void space for long enough to heal, where you then begin this process of not attracting hungry energy siphons anymore. And so what happens when you finally sit long enough in that uncomfortable, terrible void space is your energetic makeup begins to change. It has the space to change. It goes from a feeder energy, a feeder basically shines light outward. They have energy just expelling outwards, to your energetic makeup changing to generate from within. You are not shining light out anymore. It is circulating within. The energetic makeup completely shifts in this void space. And that's why it's the most uncomfortable, terrible space to be in. It's not going to be comfortable. You're used to shining outwards, looking for a feeder. And so that shining light outside of you is basically like attracting moths to a flame, to a light source, is hungry people are attracted to that light source. They don't have it from within. They don't know how to get it. And so they are starving for light, and they see that you are shining it outward for anybody. And so that's what keeps the imbalance loops alive, is if you keep going from one cord to the other and you never sit in that dying space, you will keep attracting hungry, starving people. So here's the good of this message. If you hated all of this and it was super terrible, is you are really in a rare space right now. If you are a feeder who is noticing this discomfort, who is noticing and conscious of how they are feeding these, is you are in a space where you can now heal for future connections to not siphon from you. You just have to sit without soothing this cord, without feeding this cord for long enough to begin to attract people who are not starving for your light, who are not starving for how you externally shine so bright. And it really takes sitting in a lot of void space to change, and it's going to feel uncomfortable, and no one's going to tell you that. They're going to give you a ritual and say, it's done now. That's not how it works. So let it die, let it scream, and let people in who reciprocate your light back to you in the same way. So this is a time to really embrace that void for what it is. It is healing you. It is not a terrible empty space. It is doing something profound.